TriMet is the public transit provider for the Portland metropolitan area. We serve 3 counties on the Oregon side of our metropolitan area. That's about 500 square miles and a population of about 1.5 million. Our claim to fame is actually that we actually outbox our weight class, as we say, related to transit performance. While we're about the 24th largest U.S. metropolitan area, we're actually 11th in transit ridership and 9th in per capita transit ridership. So transit is very important here in the Portland metropolitan area. An example of that is we carry about 45% of the downtown commuters to their jobs every day. Our total ridership is about 100 million rides a year. We do that on really a number of systems. Of course, the biggest is our bus system. We have 79 bus lines that carry about 60 million riders a year on 600 different buses. And we also have a very extensive light rail system. Currently runs 52 miles, 127 light rail vehicles, and that carries roughly around 40 million trips a year. And we're in the midst of completing the construction of our Orange Line, our next light rail line that will open in about a year, and that will add another 8 miles to the overall system. We also have a small commuter rail system on the west side of our region, and we of course provide ADA paratransit service that we call LIFT. That carries about 1 million very important trips a year. TriMet's a little unique as a public transit agency in that it's actually funded by a payroll tax that contributes about 54% of our overall revenue. The fare box is roughly the other quarter, and then grants and other miscellaneous revenue sources contribute the balance. And our overall operating budget is roughly around $500 million a year. Our total budget generally grows to about $1 billion when you consider some of the capital projects like we're underway with right now. Things I would also just emphasize a bit about TriMet is that it is considered one of the region's major tools for shaping urban development as well as providing mobility. So we have a very broad mission for a public transit agency.
I want to talk a little bit about our strategic financial plan, what it is, and why it came about. Primary reason was for this iteration was really the Great Recession. That's affected, of course, all public and private agencies, and TriMet was no exception. Because of the recession, TriMet delayed maintenance on some of its equipment, delayed equipment replacement. We actually also had to cut service and raise fares, which is never a popular thing to do. The other thing that is going on in this region is Metro, which is the regional government in the Portland area, is working on a state-mandated regional plan to cut carbon emissions by over 20%, and we call this Climate Smart Communities. Expanded transit service is clearly identified as one of the key elements that the region is going to have to do. And so we're anticipating a doubling of service by the year 2035, and we need to be in a strong financial position to do that, and it's likely we're going to need to look for additional revenue sources. And we didn't feel like we could go to the community, go to the business community, go to our writers without showing strong financial performance. The strategic finance plan actually requires TriMet to focus on the long term. We need to develop and maintain policies and strategies to ensure strong service and healthy financial condition. Through the development of the plan, we're actually requiring financial practices, including development of a 5-year financial forecast, which the agency has been doing for a number of years, but tied that very clearly to annual budget decisions. And as part of the financial forecast, then staff will develop an annual plan which will come to the board for approval prior to starting on budget development. And that plan will identify actions needed in the upcoming year to implement our financial goals and keep us on track. The strategic financial plan is based on policies to guide the financial management and decision making. And I'll go through some of what those policies are. Some of these were already in place before we started this process, but some of them will be developed as we go forward. The first one is to place a priority in the use of revenues from regional employment growth on the provision or new expanded service. And given our primary revenue source is payroll tax, is why we've adopted that as a policy. And we're going to seek to limit the growth of current service costs to the growth in general inflation. We've also included a fund balance and contingency policy and a debt management policy. We're going to be working on a fare policy, and particularly as we adopt an e-fare system, which we hope to be in place by 2017. We have a capital asset management policy and pension funding plans. You know, another big issue that we'll be addressing is what we call OPEB, other payroll expenses and benefits. Given our benefit structure, we have been projecting major cost increases in the future, and we're having a very strong attempt to limit those costs and then make sure also that we set aside funding for those.
The only thing I might add at this point is that the whole impetus for the strategic financial plan grew out of a board retreat where we were looking at our finances and the long-term objectives that TriMet had, and beginning to raise some questions about our ability, frankly, to manage through some pretty tough times that we all, I think, in our industry went through. And so out of that came this notion of the strategic financial plan. The other thing I'd add is that I have a terrific advantage as a CEO of TriMet, and that is a relatively small board of directors, 7 people, all appointed by the governor of Oregon, confirmed by the state senate. But more importantly, they're there because of their general public spirit and desire to make TriMet a stronger and better place. And that runs to each and every person. They're not there for political ambitions of one sort or another, or they're not there for a geographic increase of service in their area as opposed to others. They're there to see the whole agency succeed. So we're very fortunate in that regard, and out of those that background grew this notion of a strategic financial plan.
At this point, I'd like to talk a little bit about the board involvement in this process. As Neil indicated, the strategic finance plan came out of a board retreat. I was one of the primary proponents of putting together the plan, though I must admit I didn't have to argue hard at all. It was something that the board was very interested in doing, and I think that the staff were equally as interested. The board ended up appointing a subcommittee that was made up of the board, that was made up of myself. Initially, Tiffany Schweitzer, who was a board member at the time, was on the subcommittee. Her term expired, so she went off and she was replaced by board member Travis Stovall. And then our chief financial officer, initially Beth DeHamel, she changed jobs about shortly after we got started, so then Chief Financial Officer Dave Auxier was a member of the committee, and analyst Sandy Vinci. So really it was 4 people that worked through it, 2 board members and 2 staff. We discussed options, goals, what we wanted the plan to achieve, how we wanted it structured, started coming up with ideas. The staff members, Dave and Sandy, would put together drafts. They'd bring it back to the subcommittee. We'd discuss it, suggest changes, or give okay for the direction we were heading, and move forward that way. The staff put together a web page so we could put drafts of the plan and policies. We also put discussion questions on the web as a way to encourage public involvement. In addition to the initial retreat, we had following year we had a second retreat, and so the strategic financial plan as it existed at that time was subject to that. We gave regular updates on progress of the subcommittee at board meetings. We invited public comment all the way through the process, and certainly at our board meetings. But to be honest, we didn't get a lot of public involvement, and because of that, the subcommittee decided that we needed to get more public involvement, and so we sent invitations to 12 stakeholder groups to invite them to one of 2 listening posts that we had, and we got additional public input that way. The subcommittee then put the final touches on the plan, and we took the plan to the board for final adoption. So it was a process that actually took us about 1.5 years, maybe 2 years, in part because of the other financial work that was going on at the time, and certainly going through the budget process and that type of thing. But it also allowed us to test some of our initial concepts through a budget process that spanned through our discussions, and getting kind of the real-life input from that budget process also gave us important feedback that helped us to fine-tune and hone the plan. So, as I say, the plan was finally adopted by the board in July of this year, and we're now moving forward through the implementation phase.
I think the strategic financial plan has been important for us for a number of reasons. One is that it does provide staff a very precise target when we put together our budgets. And as everybody knows, one of the most important things the board does every year is to adopt a budget. That's under our statute, but that's also just sort of common sense. And what this does, it gives us some very precise policies that we can report to the board on, and report how the budget actually achieves those policies. So we're not aiming for some fuzzy, broad target. We know precisely what we're aiming for when we put together the budget, and then we can report to the board specifically on, did we hit that target, or are we short, and what are the reasons for being short, and how we can correct that over time. So that's I think a great advantage for us related to having this in place. The other point that I wanted to make is that Craig touched on is that at some point in TriMet's life, if we're going to meet the expectations of this region for strong transit service, we'll need to look for some new revenues along the way. And one of the key things for all of our constituents, particularly those in the business community who pay the payroll tax, is how are you managing the resources that we've provided you with already? And the guidelines in the strategic financial plan allow us to really report specifically on our smart financial management of the agency over time, and be able to demonstrate that and document that. So I think those are all really important notes. One of our lessons learned related to this, I think, was about public involvement. And we all want more public involvement. It's expected of us, and it's an important element of all the work we do. But you bring a topic like strategic financial plan to the public, and frankly, you get yawns for the most part. And so we had a hard time, even though we posted to the web, we reported, as Craig noted, at all the board meetings, we asked for testimony. It was really hard to get people to respond to these policies and actually put the mental energy into thinking about them. So one of the, I think, things that we did, we thought was really very helpful in that regard, was to put together these special meetings where the subcommittee that Craig noted was really leading a public discussion, but we had invited guests, people from business associations, people from interest groups of one side, sometimes on the far right, sometimes on the far left. But we had a number of meetings that we just had these panels come up and talk to the board about TriMet's finances and the policies that were proposed in the plan. And that ended up being, I think, a very constructive dialogue, not just for the board, but for the public stakeholders who participated as well. So that was one of the pieces of success. And I guess, you know, it sort of is the old story about for public involvement, people are busy these days, and they have a lot of things on the plate, so they do kind of need a written invitation to come and spend time and energy thinking about a topic. But that went well for us in that regard.
I might add that, you know, just to help explain, I'm now retired, but I had a career in local government finance and city management. And as Neil says, getting public involvement related to financial issues before you have a crisis is extremely difficult. I personally feel very good about these stakeholder meetings that we had. It was set up so it was more informal, which was a very big advantage. We were all sitting around a table, and what developed was that the stakeholders that were sitting at the meeting not only interacted with the board members and staff who were there, but they also interacted with each other. And so people were getting a better understanding of what other stakeholders' concerns were and why they had those concerns. And it became a very interesting discussion, and I think really contributed to the success of things. And I think another element of this that I do want to mention is, again, given my public finance background, throughout my career, I've noticed that when decisions are made in the moment, and that happens all the time because an issue will come up and stakeholders and citizens will come, and you know, they have very definite needs and very sincere needs, and they want a response now. And you can under that kind of environment, it's very easy to make the short-term decision. Too often, those can become problematic, and so the opportunity to look at our financial situation over the long term and put all of those concerns into the context of where we are going as an agency, the kinds of things that we need to get done, leads to better decisions. You know, we still have the difficult decisions. We've still got to deal with those. But hopefully, by having the broader context, we will ultimately come out with a better decision.